Temple denial refers to the assertion that none of the temples in Jerusalem ever existed or were located south of the highest point on the Temple Mount. History. Gold, president of the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs and former Israel ambassador to the United Nations, used the term temple denial in his 2007 book The Fight for Jerusalem, Radical Islam, the West, and the Future of the Holy City. Israeli writer David Hazany has described the phenomenon as a campaign of intellectual erasure by Palestinian leaders, writers, and scholars, aimed at undermining the Jewish claim to any part of the land, and compared the phenomenon to Holocaust denial. According to Gold and to Dennis Ross, at the 2000 Camp David summit, Yasser Arafat insisted that the Jewish temple existed in Nablus, not on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Gold describes Arafat's assertion as part of a campaign by Arafat to completely delegitimize the Israeli claim to the city. He wrote that temple denial has become a new Palestinian dogma. Others have described temple denial as part of an Islamic strategy to rule all of Jerusalem minus the Jews. According to Gold, in the wake of Arafat's remark at Camp David, temple denial spread across the Middle East like wildfire, and even subtly slipped into the writing of Middle East-based Western reporters. Gold cites Time magazine and its reporter Romesh Rotnasar as an example. Gold argues that the removal by the WAQF of archaeological material from the Temple Mount without archaeological supervision is a physical form of temple denial. Such material was being sifted for significant artifacts by Gabriel Barkay in the Temple Mount Sifting Project. Daniel Levin calls temple denial a relatively new phenomenon that has become a central tenet of Palestinian nationalism. He stated, "The Islamic Land Trust is destroying Judeo-Christian ruins beneath the Temple Mount so as to deny any connection between Judaism and Christianity and Jerusalem." The New York Times noted that temple denial, increasingly common among Palestinian leaders, also has a long history. After Israel became a state in 1948, the WAQF removed from its guidebooks all references to King Solomon's Temple, whose location at the site it had previously said was beyond dispute. In 2009, James R. DeVille, professor of Jewish studies and principal of St. Mary's College, St. Andrews, criticized the increasing practice among journalists of writing as though the existence of the ancient Jewish temples on the Temple Mount was a disputable question with two legitimate, competing narratives. According to Professor DeVille, reporters need to get it straight that there is no debate among specialists in specialist literature about the existence of the Iron Age II Judean Temple and the Second and Herodian temples in Jerusalem on the Temple Mount platform. Again, narratives to the contrary are propaganda, not scholarship. In 2005, in a book entitled From Jerusalem to Mecca and Back, The Islamic Consolidation of Jerusalem, Yitzhak Reiter describes the growing tendency of Islamic authorities to deny the existence of the Jewish temples on the Temple Mount, characterizing it as part of a campaign to increase the status of Jerusalem and the Temple Mount in Islam as part of the effort to make Jerusalem a Muslim city under Arab governance. According to Reiter, this narrative reflects the mainstream in many Islamic communities around the world, and is promoted by religious figures, politicians, academics and journalists. Not all Islamic scholars accept temple denialism. Imam Abdul Hadi Palazzi, leader of the Italian Muslim Assembly and a co-founder and a co-chairman of the Islam-Israel Fellowship, quotes the Quran to support Judaism's special connection to the Temple Mount. According to Palazzi, most authoritative Islamic sources affirm the temples. He adds that Jerusalem is sacred to Muslims because of its prior holiness to Jews and its standing as home to the biblical prophets and kings David and Solomon, all of whom he says are sacred figures also in Islam. He claims that the Quran expressly recognizes that Jerusalem plays the same role for Jews that Mecca has for Muslims. dispute over the exact location of the temple. According to Benjamin Mazur, the Roman fortress Antonia was located on the highest point of the Temple Mount, the current location of the Dome of the Rock. The 1st-century Jewish Roman historian Josephus said the Romans kept a whole legion of soldiers at Antonia. The temples were 600 feet south and 200 feet lower than the Antonia complex, on Mount Ophel, near the spring of Siloam, which provided water for sacrifices. An article disputing the location of the temple was published on the front page of the New York Times in October 2015.